Breaking news, a new legal battle in the making, a murderer case.
I'm so sorry.
Come here.
I'm so sorry.
The same home where this teenager allegedly tried to kill them all.
There is a misconception about kids being troubled when they reach a certain age. But what if that's not a misconception at all, and we are all one step away from getting snuffed out by one? Here are some of the deadliest kids in US prison whose actions were not just scary, but showed the depth of darkness in their hearts. 7. Tyler Miller.
Find that the defendant does not qualify to be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Dobson, what would the evidence have been had the case proceeded to a trial?
This is Tyler Miller, a 16-year-old teenager from Perrysburg who was found guilty of murder, amongst other charges. What could have driven this young, maybe even promising man to commit such a heinous crime that will now keep him behind bars for the rest of his life? We don't know, and we can't say much about Miller's childhood, but he seems to have been born showing signs of psychopathy, as would later be evident through his crime. Miller started smoking as early as 16, and he had a dealer called Armoni Irvin. But there was an issue. Armoni was shorting Miller of his which led to an intense emotional reaction from Miller. So on November 29th, Miller started to make plans to get rid of Armoni Irvin. He called Armoni and told him he wanted to get a new supply of and they agreed to meet in a parking lot. Upon getting there, Miller walked straight to Armoni Irvin's car and stabbed him 5 times in the abdomen and chest. Armoni hurried out of the car and died on the floor of the parking lot. Miller ran and abandoned Armoni Irvin's body, which was later found by the police. Shortly after fleeing the scene, Tyler Miller was arrested by the police. He was found with a pocket in his knife and what appeared to be blood on his shirt. When he was asked why he killed the 19-year-old Armoni Irvin, he claimed that he was shorting his and he wanted revenge. Miller could have gotten his revenge through other means by running away with a stash or changing his dealer, or stopping entirely. But he chose the bloody way. During his first trial in 2012, he pleaded not guilty as his lawyers claimed that he had a mental illness that made him unaware of the gravity of his actions. But during his incarceration, his behavior suggested that he may be very mentally sound. While he was at the juvenile center, he kept on threatening the prison guards. As if that was not enough, he attempted to smuggle in a pencil into court in an attempt to kill a special witness in the case. He was then transferred to the Woody County Center, where he told the personnel that if anyone messed with him, they were going to pay with their life.
In Wood County, Ohio, the defendant, Tyler Miller, determined to cause the death of Armoni Irvin.
But what may have sealed the deal that he wasn't mentally unwell was when he told a personnel that he didn't know why he was in so much trouble. And why was it such a big deal to kill a person? It was obvious that he understood what he did, but didn't feel any remorse, which led to the judge saying this.
Found not guilty by reason of insanity would not be well taken. It is their medical opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that at the time of the offense,
The judge was certain that Tyler had no mental illness.
the defendant did not suffer from a mental disease or defect which rendered him incapable of knowing the wrongfulness of his act. And of course, there's
Due to his lack of remorse, the judge sentenced Tyler Miller to life imprisonment with almost no chance of parole.
You understand that this is a life sentence, and parole could be granted after 20, 25, 30 years, or the parole board could decide that it would be.
But Tyler Miller is not the worst kid in this video, because the next kid was just 14 years old when he decided to kill his neighbor with zero intent. 6. Lacy Aaron Schmidt.
And ironically, Mr. Schmidt, I'm convinced.
In January of 2011, the small town of Harlem, Georgia was rocked to their core when Lacy Aaron Schmidt, the boy you see above, shot his friend. His actions led to a nationwide conversation on the appropriate punishment for juvenile criminals and how justice can be served to those who lose their lives at their hands. But here is where it all began. On January 31st, 2011, Schmidt went to the house of his friend, Alana Callahan. What could have been a chill hangout soon turned to a bloody mess. Schmidt had found a handgun in Alana's house before that day and stolen it. Then, when he went to visit her, a simple interaction soon turned to him putting a bullet in the back of her head. He then attempted to get rid of her body by dragging her into the nearby woods, where she actually died from the gunshot wounds. Unluckily for Schmidt, Alana's sister got home before he could escape. She noticed 3 things at first. Schmidt and Alana's shoes were in the house, a chair was knocked over, and there was blood splattered all over the carpet. Schmidt walked into the house as she was analyzing it, and he claimed that someone came to drag Alana away, and he didn't know what to do. He then stepped out of the house with Alana's siblings to find her in an attempt to seem like he cared. A few minutes after the search started, Schmidt suddenly claimed that he could see Alana's body, and that was when her sister realized that he was lying. There was no way he could see Alana from his vantage point. He also made his lie more obvious when he approached Alana's body, pulled a stick out of her hair, and claimed that the police were going to use that to pin the murder on him. Schmidt was trying hard, too hard in fact, to pin the murder on an unknown person. But when the cops arrived, they noticed he was the only one showing no emotions while Alana's siblings screamed their lungs out in fear. He was finally found guilty of Alana's murder after he told 5 different stories of what happened that day. After a lot of drilling, he finally admitted to killing Alana, but his motive remained unclear. What we have been able to deduce is that he was banned from the Callahan's apartment a week prior to the murder, so he may have acted out of resentment. Whatever his reason was, it didn't matter because he now had to face the full wrath of the law.
Set his plan in motion. Through the end of that day where they had all the interviews and the investigation, he never showed emotion.
From the minute Schmidt stepped into the court, the judge noticed that he didn't show remorse for his crime, which meant he didn't care at all about what he had done. Because of his lack of concern, Lacy Aaron Schmidt was sentenced to life imprisonment to protect society.
And as a general proposition, and this isn't the first time that I will have given a sentence of life, if that's what in fact I do in just a moment.
But there are some teenagers who have been found guilty of murder they didn't confess to. The next kid was accused and tried for a murder, but over 40 years later, many people are still clamoring for his release. 5. Brendan Dassey. Just like many other times that people have complained about the justice system, Brendan Dassey's case is one where you need to look closely before taking a stance.
I'm talking about Making a Murderer, which told the story of Stephen Avery and his nephew Brendan, who were both found guilty of the murder of Teresa Halbach.
He was accused of murder alongside his uncle. But what exactly happened? Brendan Dassey was born in 1989 in Wisconsin. His parents died when he was 2 years old, making him grow up with his brothers. He was not like other kids. Although some people who knew him claimed that he was respectful to teachers, he struggled academically. He attended special classes, but he was behind on at least 3 subjects. At the age of 16, Dassey was at a 6-year-old reading and verbal level. In short, his IQ was considered low average or borderline deficient. His uncle, Steve Avery, who was the main suspect of this murder case, was exonerated of a violent assault case in 2003. He was trying to get a bill passed called the Avery Bill, which required police to pay close attention to how they handled eyewitnesses of crime. After his release, he moved into a trailer home close to where Brendan and his siblings were living, and that is where tragedy struck. On November 3, 2003, a photographer named Teresa Halbach was reported missing. A month ago in October, while working for Auto Trader, she showed up at Steve Avery's apartment to work there. Then shortly after, she was called back by Avery, who specifically requested for her. But after getting to his home, she never went back home, which led to her parents reporting her missing. A few days after the report, her car was found partially concealed in the Avery salvage yard. A closer look into the car revealed blood, Teresa's charred phone, camera, license, and some bone fragments. The blood was tested and found to belong to Teresa and also Steve Avery. Avery was already in jail for possession of a firearm, and police found restraints in his truck, which they deduced could be for the purpose of committing assault. He was again arrested for murder and mutilation of a corpse. Notice how in all these, we haven't mentioned Brendan Dassey. Well, that's because there was no forensic evidence of him being around when Avery killed Teresa Halbach. But the investigators drilled him using threats and promises, which led to a testimony that seemed sketchy.
Come on, Brandon, be honest. You can do it. Just tell us the truth.
I grabbed her arm, put it on the side, and tied her up.
Not only did they reveal information about the case, the investigators made Dassey admit to things he wasn't sure even happened.
Shot her.
Why don't you draw where the bloodstains would have been?
The investigators seemed to have capitalized on the fact that he wasn't intellectually sound to get a confession out of him. Dassey was interviewed under extreme pressure, and at one point he went through 3 rounds of questioning in 24 hours. He was eventually arrested for being party to a murder, assault, and mutilating a corpse. While talking to his lawyer, Dassey begged to take a lie detector test, claiming that everything he told the police was said under pressure. They were able to find a polygraph operator who told Dassey that the machine could tell deception and that Dassey was going to jail for life if he didn't apologize or beg for help. So once again, Dassey confessed to being a part of the crime. Despite no forensic evidence to prove that he was at the crime scene, Dassey's trial lasted for 9 days before he was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a chance for parole in 2048. The public responded with outrage and have since been calling for the release of Brendan Dassey, claiming his innocence, and the police used his intellectual disability against him. Many lawyers have tried to help him fight the case by claiming unlawful detention and coercion, but he continues to serve his jail term. What do you think about this case? Do you believe Dassey was also guilty, or is this mismanagement of the case? Should his intellectual disability have been taken into account during his trial? The next case would make your skin crawl because these kids weren't forced to confess to their heinous crimes. But before we get to that, here's our ultimate pick for today. Teenagers aren't the only ones who are found guilty of crime. Sometimes, little children also commit accidental murders. But rather than jail, they are sent to rehab, where they work with children's psychologists that help them navigate the trauma. What do you think about that sort of move? Let us know in the comment with the hashtag #UltimatePick. Now let's get back to the inhumane acts of these brothers. 4. The Bever Brothers. The case of the Bever Brothers is one that would make you question who exactly is at fault when a juvenile goes rogue.
Okay, who's attacking your family?
What?
Who's attacking your family?
Yes.
Who is it?
This call was made by a child in the Bever family after Robert and Michael Bever went on a killing spree in their home in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. It all started on July 22, 2015, when the brothers stabbed their parents and 3 siblings. Robert was 18 and Michael was 16 when this heinous crime happened. But what could have led them to this? Neighbors reported that the Bever family was very reserved and the parents homeschooled their children. They also prevented them from interacting with the neighbors or keeping friends, making the kids very isolated. In fact, the neighbors found out the names of some of the children when they were revealed by the medical examiner of the case. One of the siblings that survived, Crystal, claimed that their father was abusive. David Bever, the father, would verbally and physically abuse his children. And if there is one thing we see that is common amongst killers, it's usually the presence of abusive parents. We are not saying they are at fault, but it could be a catalyst. Robert and Michael start planning the mass murder to get rid of not just their abusive parents, but also get guns and commit a mass shooting that was worse than the Columbine High School massacre of 1999. Out of the 2 brothers, Robert seemed to be most disturbed. He revealed that the plan was to kill their family members, dismember them, and place them in plastic bins. Then they would go out with the family car and kill 5 people each in different locations. He wanted to end the night with a body count of 50. He also told investigators that he admired serial killers. So it's possible that killing their family didn't come from a place of wanting to escape abuse, but rather to fulfill a killing fantasy. Robert got a job at a religious call center so he could buy weapons to carry out the crime. He bought knives, hatchets, surgical blades, and ordered guns that would have been delivered a day after the family was wiped out. On the night of the murder, they lured their 12-year-old sister to the room where they slit her throat and stabbed her stomach. They also killed their parents, 5-year-old sister and 7-year-old brother. Their 12-year-old brother, David Beaver, called the police to report the case, and they killed him with multiple stab wounds while he was still on the call. But the call David made saved 13-year-old Crystal and a 2-year-old child. Robert and Michael fled through the back door when the police arrived and hid under the bushes on a wooded property. They were quickly apprehended and admitted to the crimes. Robert was sentenced to 5 life sentences and an additional life imprisonment term with no possibility of parole. He attempted to hang himself in jail and was placed on suicide watch. There was no escape from his reality. Michael was also sentenced to 5 life sentences with no possibility of parole. There is no justification for their crime, the same way the next crime makes no sense, as it shows that no amount of sacrifice can stop a psychopathic kid. 3. Sierra Holth. This is the story of 16-year-old Sierra Holth and her boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, who were sentenced to life imprisonment after killing Sierra's father. David Holth was a single father who had fought to gain custody of his children after divorcing his wife, who was a politician. He had managed to get custody of Sierra, but little did he know that she was going to be the end of him. When Sierra was 16, she started dating Aaron Guerrero, who was 18 at the time. For some reason, their parents were against the relationship, but the pair couldn't leave themselves alone. They actually had plans to run away together, which their parents objected to. They were teenagers still in high school. How did they think they were going to survive living alone? Since their parents didn't want to respect their wishes, Sierra and Aaron started to make plans to get rid of David Holth, Sierra's father, on April 2021. The day before the murder, they bought oil, lighters, and other things to start a fire. On the day of the murder, they stabbed David 70 times, decapitated his body, and set his house on fire.
16-year-old Sierra Holth and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, are charged in her father's death. Police say the couple stabbed him more than 70 times back in April, ultimately killing him because he wouldn't let them date.
They ran away in his car before the police could suspect them. 3 days after the murder, Sierra and Aaron posted a video on their YouTube channel. Aaron started it with, Sierra told him he wasn't supposed to say that, but for some reason, they went ahead to share it.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. After Day 3 after murdering somebody.
Wow! Don't put that on the camera.
The police arrested them, and after investigation, they were found guilty of murder. Aaron claimed that he felt sorry about what he had done, but he couldn't say the same for Sierra. And truly, Sierra didn't apologize for what she had done. When they were arrested, they claimed that they killed David because he was abusive, but his family denied it. Sierra and Aaron were sentenced to life imprisonment with a possibility of parole after 22 years. Now, not only would they not be together, they may never see beyond the 4 walls of a jail cell. This story shows that acting irrationally never ends well, just like how this next kid ruined his life out of fear. 2. Joshua Phillips. The man you see is Joshua Phillips, and he has been in jail since he was 14 years old after murdering a child. Joshua was born in Pennsylvania in 1984 to Melissa and Steve Phillips. Steve was a drug addict and alcoholic and was abusive towards Joshua and Melissa. They both lived in fear because of him. He didn't stop at being violent towards them. Steve got angry whenever Joshua had friends over, especially little girls. Melissa could not understand what her husband had against little girls, and the strict rules he imposed took a toll on Joshua. The family eventually moved to Florida. Neighbors described Joshua as a quiet and friendly kid. His teachers said he was popular even though he didn't stand out. But none of this negates the gruesome way he killed his 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton. Although Joshua Phillips wasn't allowed to have friends over when his father wasn't around, he went out to play baseball with Maddie Clifton on November 3, 1998. As they were playing, he accidentally threw the baseball at her eye, and she started bleeding, screaming and crying. His father was going to be home soon, and he knew the consequences of having a friend over, especially one whom he had just injured. So out of fear, he pulled her into the house and hit her head with a baseball bat before placing her under his bed. Steve came home some hours later, and Joshua talked to him as if he didn't just kill a child. After their conversation ended, he went back to his room and heard Maddie Clifton groaning in pain under his bed. So he dragged her out, slit her throat, and stabbed her in the chest 7 times. He then put her body back under his bed and carried on with life as normal. Maddie was reported missing by her parents, and everybody in the town, including Joshua Phillips, joined in the search. A week later, Melissa noticed a wet spot on Joshua's floor. She looked round his room, and that was when she found Maddie Clifton. She immediately reported it to the police, and they arrested him at his school. Hours after the arrest, he confessed to killing Maddie. Joshua Phillips was tried as an adult and sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of a child. He has since completed college and now works as a paralegal in jail to help other inmates write their appeal. He is still in jail despite numerous attempts to appeal his case. Joshua Phillips's defense argued that he had panic, which bordered along the lines of madness. This condition is similar to that of this final troubled kid. 1. Roxana Sorsi. The story of Roxana Sorsi is one that portrays the dangers of teenagers dating adults. It shows what happens when adults prey on little ones and why more people need to speak against it. When Roxana was 15, she started dating 23-year-old Michael Rivera. There was no way she could tell her parents that she was in a relationship with someone almost a decade older than her, so Rivera started to give her ideas to get rid of her parents so they could run away together. Why a 23-year-old wanted to run away with a 15-year-old, we don't know. But on the 14th of October, 2015, at 2 a.m., Rivera and Roxana were hanging outside her family house when they conspired to kill them all. So Roxana went back into the house while Rivera stayed outside and gave her instructions through text on how to go about killing everyone in the house. Through Rivera's guidance, Roxana stabbed her 12-year-old brother in the throat. She could not continue, so she ran off with Rivera. Her brother was rushed to a health center where his stab wounds were treated. Police found and arrested Michael Rivera and Roxana Sorsi. They were charged with conspiracy to murder and were hit with a $1 million bail each. Do you think all child criminals, especially killers, are born with their brain wired that way? Or do they become that way because of environmental influence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Ensure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more information like this one.